Well, what did you think of my story?
Look, romantasy isn't really my thing. So because of that, I'm going to judge this piece extra harshly because I can't stand that genre. This really should have been a military, science fiction, epic. Because that's what I like to read.
What? Don't worry. I don't actually write romantasy, but you really shouldn't be critiquing someone's work based entirely off your own preferences. It's harsh and it's a bit close-minded. I think you really need to be a bit more constructively critical. Hi, my name's Harvey, and I'm the chair of Meridian Australis. We're a speculative fiction writing community based in Melbourne, Australia. This here is the president and co-founder, Arden.
Meridian Australis started as an opportunity for us to really help speculative fiction writers hone their craft in detailed critique groups. We realised the hardest part of writing is that it's a very solo activity, and writing alone, it can suck. So we wanted to do something about that. Since starting in 2023, we've started a podcast, Roundtable. We've interviewed a bunch of really excellent authors, both Australian and international. We've published our own anthology, Austral, which is available in our web store. And now we've decided to start a YouTube channel.
We're all about getting speculative fiction writers to improve at their craft, whether it be improving the quality of their stories or encouraging them to submit to publications, taking the next steps to actually get into the industry.
We'll be showing you guys a behind-the-scenes look at our critique groups, as well as looking at the publishing journey for Austral 2025. We'll be interviewing some great authors, and we'll also be talking about all things speculative fiction.
What was it for you that you really got out of Meridian last year?
I think the most important thing for me has always been community. I mean, as we always talk about, writing can be this really solitary task, and people kind of try and navigate this really complex, really confusing world of publishing and submission processes, and it can all feel a bit overwhelming, and especially when you're alone, it feels as though you're adrift on this massive ocean. Being able to have a community of writers who are sharing the same goals and sharing ideas and really coming together to support each other, particularly during the difficult periods, it's been brilliant. Can't fault it.
It's so true as well, especially when it comes to the craft. If you're surrounded by people who are as good as, if not better than you, and they're also more motivated as well, it's a real kick up the arse to get you to take the next steps, which I really enjoyed.
Yeah, there's nothing quite as humbling in a good way as sort of going into a critique group with a piece of writing that you think is pretty good and then realising you need some more work. But equally, I think that the best pieces of writing I've ever done have been through these critique groups. You know, it's you go and you sort of show where your weaknesses are and you learn from that, you improve, and then, a couple of weeks later you come back and bam, it's a polished piece. And that's a great feeling.
And the consistency of the critique groups is also really good because the people in your groups start to learn what your strengths are and what your style is. So when they're critiquing, it actually feels really informed. It's not just randoms coming in and being like, I don't like what you're doing because it's not my genre. People will really meet you halfway, and it makes the criticism better and your work just gets better. I really love it.
Completely agree, yeah. So Harvey, what about you? What's something you really enjoyed with Meridian?
The biggest thing for me is this just such a wide range of taste and talent in the org. What I love the most is being exposed to work and genres and styles that I wouldn't really have picked up and read myself, and definitely wouldn't have tried to write at all. It really boosts my learning and just prompts me to search for inspiration in much wider range of places, which has really helped. I think even when you come back to writing in the genre that you've always loved, you are stronger for it if you've had a little dalliance around in things that you were less familiar with.
Completely.
And it improves the quality of your work, even if you don't actually stop writing in the same genre.
I think that's completely right. It's that idea of like, you know, you're going on these journeys and you're taking bits and pieces back with you every time. I mean, I know that I'm a big cyberpunk fan, but before this, I had very, very little experience reading a lot of the kind of almost steampunk-esque fantasy that a lot of guys write. And now I find that that's one of my favorite things to write, because I've learned so much about the process by reading what other people have written and understanding the things that they enjoy about the genre and realizing, hey, actually, I enjoy that too. It's just you've never been exposed to it.
And you can also kind of tell when someone has never read outside of the genre that they want to write or read, because things become just sort of watered down, like tropes of tropes of tropes. And I think like the best and the most original work comes, even if you're set in a specific genre, it comes from someone who's really worldly about influences and going out there and seeing what different types of stories can be told, because there are so many more ways to tell a story than you think, and that show up in any one particular genre as well. And I just really like how consistently we meet and how reliable all the organisation is.
Absolutely. It is the one thing that keeps you consistent. I think that, you know, life has all these ups and downs, all these different cycles and things you have to kind of navigate. And as a creative, a lot of emphasis is placed on this idea of these, you know, the muse has to visit and this sort of great motivation. But it's tropey to say, but it is true that, you know, it's 1% motivation and 99% perspiration in this case. And having that cycle of critique groups meeting and being like, oh, I need to produce something for this next meeting. I need to make sure I put the hours in. I edit my piece. I draft this new idea I've had. Just making sure you're doing that means that you end up putting the hours in. You end up doing the work, or else otherwise you'd find excuses. And I'm absolutely guilty of this. I know if I didn't have critique groups, I would have written one story last year and I would have said, that's it, I'm done.
And I'm exactly the same. I really have been so helped by the regularity and sort of almost like the pressure, but it's a good pressure. And I think as well, there are moments when members have had to like step away for a time, but I think what the community has done so well is there's always the feeling of they are going to come back. It's not like, oh, you step away and then you haven't written anything for a year and then you're just suddenly not an author anymore. Like, I think people take the time they need, but they know that when they have more energy, they can come back, and there's still fortnightly meetings and everyone else has still been keeping up and going strong. There's actually a really good quote in one of our interviews of T.R. Napa where he talks about the most important tool you can have as an author is just ironclad discipline. And you can't complain or take any excuse for granted when you because all you should be really doing is finding any and all times to write and sitting down and just doing it, which I loved reading that.
And we have people from all walks of life. I think that's interesting. We've got, people who are in uni and studying writing professionally, and there's people who are full-time employees working office jobs 9 to 5. It's really validating to see people who are able to take those little sections of time that they have wherever in the day just to kind of apply to something creative. And that's kind of the beauty of it all, is that Meridian Australis is really about encouraging you to find ways to hone the craft within your own lifestyle. We never come and say you have to write at this time, you have to get up at 6 a.m. and do your 1,000 words.
Morning pages.
Absolutely not. If someone told me to write at 6 a.m, I would have some very choice words for them that I won't repeat now. But what I will say is that everyone's sort of pathway to writing is different. And I think that having a community that embraces that is just the best thing a writer can have.
And also seeing people pick up different strategies from other people with different pathways. Like maybe the way someone else does something, which I've always thought wouldn't work for me, and then I try it and it actually does help. And that's why the big diverse group is really amazing as well.
Definitely, yeah.
But no, a huge part of it for me is just the inspiration.
I
feel like you said waiting for the muse to strike, and that can be such a big thing when you are working alone. But there's nothing better for your brain to start whirring than being surrounded by a bunch of other authors, because no matter, even if 5 people are all having a writer's block moment over in a corner, there's another 20 authors in the community who have these amazing ideas and want advice on a story, or are talking about an idea that they don't have time to turn into a story, and then you go, oh, that sounds really cool. I'm totally gonna not steal it, but like,
Borrow
oh, that's
it.
a really, yeah. And it really sort of, I think it brings the flexibility in your brain out. It sort of makes you go, oh, I actually can turn things into stories because you just see it happen in front of you with other authors doing it. And you just get like, oh, well, I can actually do that. It's not that hard.
It's also, I think it's being able to jump into the Discord at any time of day and be like, look, I've got this idea, here's what I'm doing with it. And people will jump in and go, that sounds great, or that's not quite right. And they'll give you a whole bunch of just, it's the sounding board. And having a sounding board that is not just you talking to yourself. Because you'll talk yourself in circles and eventually you'll talk yourself out of it. That's the way it always goes. Having people who are willing to put their kind of energy into your craft, just as you put your energy into theirs, it compounds and it feeds back on itself, and it gives you a really good foundation upon which you can be inspired and find inspiration in the smallest things. It's great.
And that kind of brings us to the most important part of the whole thing, and the reason the community is so important is that it's just really amazing and fun and enjoyable to be a part of. I think especially when it comes to when you share an idea or a story with the group and you have like a whole collection of people screaming at you through the Discord how much they love the work or love the idea you had, or they were inspired by your piece, and like all of those feelings, just like the positive feedback. I think when you're working as a writer on your own, especially when you're trying to break in, it's either neutral where you're working and you're like not sure what's going on, if anything you're doing is good or bad. And then it's a lot of negativity because it's rejection and rejection and rejection and rejection, or you read something that you wrote a week ago and it's horrible and you never want to touch it again.
Yeah, you're the worst author ever kind of thing.
Yeah, and we're really good at focusing on the negative. And I think this community almost forces us not only to have fun with our work, but to also have faith in our work, because you can't be writing for months and months and months on end and getting feedback from people for over a year and not improve at your craft. Like that would be amazing. If we had a member who had been in here for like a year and hadn't gotten better, I'd be so impressed, right? And so I think like that's such a huge part of it. Just keeping me at the keyboard, even when I'm having a bad week or when I have no faith in my ability, or I think the world's going to burn down and art doesn't matter anymore. Like Meridian's just always here, and I just love it.
It is fun. It's fun to hang out with your friends. You know, I think that as much as it is about the craft, it's about the writing, but it's also about the friends we make along the way.
It is,
And I think that's what keeps me coming back. Is, you know, every fortnight I get to meet with my mates and I get to eat pizza and talk about my writing and sort of exchange ideas. I can't imagine a better way to spend my time.
Hopefully this video has helped you guys understand a little bit more about why Meridian Australis are doing what we're doing, basically just to help young creatives improve at their craft.
And if that sounds like something you're interested in, send us a sample of your work. In the meantime, follow us on our Instagram, our Roundtable podcast, available where you get your podcasts, and visit our website. All the details are in the description box below.
Look, Arden, thank you so much. If I hadn't joined Meridian Australis, I don't think this piece or any of my work would be nearly as good as it is. I really appreciate it.
No problem. I'd say the same, but I'm just built different.
Thanks for watching, guys.